Hello and welcome, and thank you for taking the time to check out our latest video upload on it's probably outdated, a new Bruce Lee bio debunks myths about the Kung Fu Jesus. Bruce Lee's fight with Chuck Norris in The Way of the Dragon is considered one of the best fight scenes of all time. Lee was considered unbeatable. Now a new bio explores his flaws. Bruce Lee was training a friend one day when he did something unexpected. The star of the classic film Enter the Dragon was already known for his fanatical fitness regimen. He didn't smoke or drink. He gobbled vitamin supplements and drank raw blended hamburger meat. He transformed himself into a lithe figure who could do 2-finger push-ups and send burly men flying with his famed 1-inch punch. But Lee ended the training session at his home on this particular day with a different type of flourish. He lit a joint and started puffing away. It came from a box of marijuana cigarettes he kept in his garage. Lee would later move on to hashish, carrying it around in little bags and nibbling on it like edibles. It raises the consciousness level, Lee explained when another martial artist asked him why he got high. That's not the type of story one typically hears about Lee. Since he died at age 32, his legend has grown to such mythological levels that one martial artist calls him Kung Fu Jesus. A new biography, though, debunks some of the most popular myths about the man. Bruce Lee, A Life by Matthew Polly, is the first in-depth account of Lee's journey from a street-brawling teenager to a global icon. The book, which comes on the 45th anniversary of Lee's death, features interviews from everyone from his childhood classmates to friends who saw him smoke up to the woman who last saw him alive. Lee's charisma, ambition and relentless appetite for combat leapt off the pages. You can practically hear his cat-like shrieks in some of the most vivid sections. If you think you know Lee, this book may shock you. It's Bruce Lee's role, Kato, in the TV series Green Hornet, made him a star in Hong Kong, and it was changed to the Kato Show. This book may shock you. Among its surprises, Lee was a kinetic genius who could quickly master any martial arts fighting style, but he never learned to ride a bike and was declared medically unfit for the draft after failing his physical. We actually saw him on motorbikes. He talked about an ordinary bicycle. And why did he fail his physical? Probably because he had an inverted testicle, supposedly. He has been portrayed as an impoverished immigrant who came to America to make it big, but he actually grew up in an affluent Hong Kong family with his own chauffeur and 2 live-in maids. He is seen as a Chinese superhero with a statue in Hong Kong, but he was also part Jewish. Yeah, from his mother's side. Matthew Polly, who interviewed at least 100 of Lee's friends and family members, say people often forget that Lee was virtually unknown in the United States when he died. His breakthrough movie, Enter the Dragon, was released less than a month after his mysterious death in Hong Kong in July 1973. Lee is the only major Western icon whose fame is entirely posthumous, says Polly, who as a skinny, bullied kid was inspired by Lee's films to later move to China and study Kung Fu at a Shaolin temple. Lee wasn't just an entertainer, he was an evangelist. Millions took up martial arts because of him, Polly says. No other celebrity changed people's lives in that way, Polly says. Nobody watched the Steve McQueen movie and took up something. People study martial arts because of Lee, and it changed their lives for the better. Bruce Lee has a place in a lot of fans' hearts as a demigod, or what I call, or Matthew Polly calls, a patron saint of Kung Fu. He had a missionary effect. He never apologised for being Asian. He also changed the way many Westerners regarded Asians, Polly's book shows. Lee was the first Asian American actor to embody the classic Hollywood definition of a star. Polly wrote, men wanted to be him and women wanted to be with him. Yeah, that's the bonus that comes with being a superstar, right? Lee's pride in his heritage was contagious. And there's more information here on Bruce. There he is with Linda. Lee, with his wife Linda, was a racial pioneer in many ways. His interracial marriage was rare at the time, and he broke martial arts tradition by teaching students of all races, all colours, right? He didn't care. Wanted to show them the beauty of Chinese martial arts, etc. Polly says he wasn't trying to be salacious. He wanted to show another side of Lee beyond the patron saint of Kung Fu image. He interviewed Lee's widow and daughter for the book, but hasn't heard from them since. It published last month, or that month, whatever. Neither responded to CNN's request for comment. I hope one day that they will see it as it is, Polly said. It was written from a place of love. Davis Miller, author of the Tao of Bruce Lee, says fanboys won't love Polly's book. Those guys need to believe in Kung Fu Jesus, says Miller, whom Polly consulted for his bio. And they're not getting that, they're getting a guy who is human. And taking out Sammy Davis' Jr.'s bodyguard. Some information here. Okay, Miller here says that Lee was probably the best martial artist at the time of his death, but wasn't unbeatable. Though Lee trained with and taught martial arts champions like Chuck Norris and Joe Louis, Miller says he's not sure how Lee would have faced in a fight against a top fight boxer, i.e. Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson. He goes on to say, I don't think the guy was ever tested, Miller says. Bruce Lee didn't have the real world experience that boxers had. One man who saw the Lee fight has no doubt about what he could do. Doug Palmer was one of Lee's first students in America. He is one of a small group who trained with and learned directly from Lee. Palmer, who appears in Polly's book, met Lee when the martial artist was 20 and knew him until his untimely death. At one point, Lee even moved in with Palmer's family. He had no compunction, no hesitation about testing himself against the biggest, the fastest and the best in whatever he came across. Palmer, now an attorney in Seattle, told CNN. Lee didn't have many street fights as an adult because he quickly showed would-be aggressors they didn't stand a chance, says Palmer, who is writing a memoir entitled Bruce Lee, Sifu Friend and Big Brother. Well, we'd see if we could find that. Most challenges he could handle without a fight, Palmer says. The way that he could tie somebody up or hit them at will or deflect their punches at will, it was very clear. Very few people would push that. Polly says everybody he talked to saw Lee spar or fight rendered the same verdict. He was very, very, very good. Polly listed the reasons why Lee was a genius at body movement, who could master any martial arts style. He could read his opponents and know when and how they were going to attack, seemingly before they even moved, and he had otherworldly quickness. Polly says Lee's body was like one giant fast twitch muscle. He fought a lot. He liked to fight. It made him happy, Polly says. Lee would often greet other martial artists and street brawlers with the same invitation: hit me as hard as you can with either hand, whenever you're ready. Polly writes, he would then brush away their punches as easily as would a baby and counter with strikes that would stop inches away from their target. Sometimes Lee didn't hold back. When a Japanese karate expert challenged him, Lee knocked the man out in 11 seconds. But Lee didn't always dominate. Polly tells a charming story of Lee lightly sparring with his first master, the legendary Ip Man, who by that time was elderly but could more than hold his own. Polly tells another story about Lee taking out a humongous bodyguard of Sammy Davis Jr. Lee was accompanying two friends during his days as a struggling actor when the trio ran into the bodyguard near a Las Vegas casino. The man suddenly raised his hand to wave at someone behind Lee, but Lee thought the bodyguard was about to attack him. Quicker than a blink, Lee kicked out one of the bodyguard's legs, locked up his arms, bent him backwards until he was helpless, and went right at his throat with the points of his fingers. Polly writes, the story ended with Lee's apology and the bodyguard asking, "What the hell did you do to me?" and how he really died. Polly offers a more prosaic explanation: heat stroke. He says it's common for heat stroke victims to suffer from swelling of the brain. Lee had several risk factors for heat stroke. He collapsed 3 months earlier after isolating himself in a hot editing room without air conditioning. He'd had his armpit sweat glands removed because he disliked sweat stains on his clothes, and the impending release of Enter the Dragon kept him from sleeping and eating, and so forth. Okay. There's plenty more information here. Okay. So what we're going to do is going to take a look at that particular book by Matthew Polly that we came across. Bruce Lee, A Life by Matthew Polly. available free on public access, public domain, contents page. It's probably very different from the proper version. Knowing others is wisdom, knowing yourself is enlightenment. Lao Tzu. Depends on what Chinese language you're using. Okay, prologue. Tale of two funerals. The crowd of mourners began gathering on the evening of July 24th, 1973 outside the Kowloon funeral parlour in anticipation of the ceremony the next morning. As the appointed hour of 10 a.m. drew closer, their numbers swelled and multiplied until over 15,000 Hong Kong residents stood behind police barricades, looked down from balconies, or perched precariously on the city's famous neon signs to catch a final glimpse of their idol's coffin. 5 days earlier, Bruce Lee had died at the age of 32. Several hundred extra police officers were detailed to control the crowd, wearing lime green shorts and short sleeves shirts, black shoes, knee socks and billed caps. The cops looked like overgrown Boy Scouts on a summer trip. And there's more here. Who's this Ting Pei? Betty Ting Pei, whose apartment Lee had died in. Right. Much to the disappointment of the throng, Betty chose to stay home where she was reported to be under heavy sedation. She sent a wreath instead with a note to Bruce from Ting Pei. Next to it, a tearful 6-year-old boy dropped a spray of flowers with a simple message from a little fan. Oh, how cute. Yeah, there they all there, all the people. And then there's McQueen, Shannon Brandon Lee, James Coburn, probably Dan Santo, James Lee, Robert Lee, all them there at his funeral. There's more information on that funeral. Many mourners refused to leave because they knew this was the last time they would be near the hero. The Hong Kong tabloids had angrily reported that Linda planned to bury her husband in America, making it nearly impossible for the average Chinese fan to visit his grave. Under the headline, Lee's body flies to America tomorrow, the Oriental Daily wrote, Linda has stuck to her guns regarding several things about Lee's death. She is obviously holding some kind of grudge. From the start, Linda wanted to ship Lee's body back to America for autopsy, but due to legal restrictions, she relented. However, the body will be sent to America for burial. Apparently, his brain was sent, or a portion of his brain was sent to New Zealand for them to look at it, all this sort of stuff. Okay, there's more information here on his funeral and everything related to it. And it talks about the pallbearers, who were Steve McQueen, James Coburn, Bruce's assistant Jeet Kune Do instructors, Taka Kimura and Dan Inosanto, his younger brother Robert Lee, and Peter Chin, a family friend from Los Angeles, etc. Excuse me. Got Kermit the Frog in my throat. Yeah, Little Dragon, going on about when he was born, who he was born to, etc., etc. Goes on about his father. And Japanese probably invading where they were living, occupying it, right, pushing the imperialism. Okay, so it's about his mother. Grace Ho was a member of the Eurasian Bosman Hodong clan, Hong Kong's equivalent of the Rockefellers or the Kennedys. Her grandfather was Charles Henry Morris Bosman, because I don't know if many people cover her family history. Although many have thought Bosman was German Catholic, Bruce Lee's great grandfather was actually Dutch Jewish. He was born Moses Hartog Bosman in Rotterdam on August 29, 1839. So there you go. Bruce Lee had a touch of Dutch Jewish, German and Chinese. Moses joined the Dutch East Asia Company as a teenager and arrived in Hong Kong in 1859. His fortune was made in the coolie trade. He shipped Chinese peasant labourers to Dutch Guyana to work the sugar plantations after African slavery was abolished, and to California to build the Central Pacific Railroad. His business success led him to be appointed the Dutch consul to Hong Kong in 1866. Given the anti-Semitism of the time, all of his letters to the Netherlands Minister of Foreign Affairs were signed M. Bosman, and so forth. But he fell into serious financial difficulty and went bankrupt in 1869. He abandoned his Chinese family, moved to California, and changed his name to Charles Henry Morris Bosman. To protect her children, Zi Tai became the fourth concubine to a Chinese cattle merchant, Kwok Chung. He had little interest in providing for her Eurasian children and barely gave them enough money to eat. But Zi Tai convinced them to pay for their children's tuition to the prestigious Central School, now Queen's College, where they learned English. Robert Hodong was the eldest son of Zi Tai's 6 children. With Bosman, he grew up to become the comprador, foreign agent, for J.T. Matheson, the largest trading conglomerate in East Asia. He made his fortune in shipping, etc., etc. And there's more information here. Nothing is known about Grace Ho's English mother or why she gave up her little girl, but Grace was raised by Miss Chung as her daughter. Miss Chung. So maybe that's where the friendship came from with Bruce and William Chung and Hawkins Chung. William Chung being the now Grand Master of Wing Chun Kung Fu, residing in Australia. As the one half English, 1/4 Dutch Jewish and 1/4 Han Chinese child of an elite Eurasian family in colonial Shanghai, Grace Ho's upbringing was very European. Instead of learning to read Chinese characters, she was taught English and French. As a teenager, she studied Western medicine in hopes of becoming a nurse. She also converted to Catholicism, no doubt attracted to its absolute insistence on monogamy and condemnation of polygamy. So she may have taught that to Bruce, insisted on that as a mother, and he may have carried it on into his adult life. So he may not really have played around. He might have been flirty and all that sort of stuff. So like, look at my great abs, look at my muscles, and naturally, women want to touch it. Like one older woman he came across on a set, movie set or something. He says, feel my forearms. Right? She felt them. She said they're like velvet, they're really warm and hard as, all that sort of stuff. That's the kind of stuff we would do. Look at my abs. Touch them, all that sort of stuff. Okay. So Grace saw firsthand how miserable it made her adopted mother to compete with a dozen other concubines for the attention of one man. Grace was determined to live a very different life. She wasn't happy with her father's traditional sinful ways, says Phoebe Lee, Bruce's older sister. Instead of accepting an arranged marriage as was common for Chinese and Eurasians of her class, Grace ran off to Hong Kong when she was 18 and moved in with her uncle Robert. Grace became a socialite in Hong Kong, filling her days with fashionable social gatherings. She was wealthy, independent and single throughout her early 20s, a rarity for a Chinese woman in that era, until the day Li Hoi Chun's opera troupe came to Sir Robert Hodong's Idlewood mansion. Sir Robert intended the event for his friends, but his niece Grace Ho asked her uncle to allow her to attend, and so forth. In 1930s China, it was unheard of for a woman to pursue a man, but Grace sought out Li Hoi Chun and charmed him. She just found him fascinating, right? She was deeply moved by his performance, technique, and developed feelings for him. She fell in love because he made her laugh. Yeah, how nice. Okay. Grace was supposed to wed a wealthy Eurasian scion, not the son of illiterate Chinese peasants. Her entire clan was against the relationship. Threats were made, pressure was applied, but Mum was very independent, strong-willed and adaptable, says Robert Lee, and she finally made up her mind she wanted to be with their dad. As a child of two cultures, Grace's choice was a microcosm of the conflict between Western individualism and Chinese tradition, romanticism versus family obligation. In traditional China's patriarchal polygamous culture, Grace Ho wed for love. She wasn't formally disowned, but her decision to elope caused a rupture and she was financially cut off. Grace went from being a wealthy socialite to the wife of a Chinese actor. If Grace had any regrets, she never spoke of them. After her romantic rebellion against her family, she settled comfortably into life of a simple Chinese wife, dressing plainly, etc., etc. She loved to knit and play mahjong with her friends. Her personality embodied the Chinese ideal for a woman, Wen Rao. Hopefully that's how you say it. Quiet, gentle and tender. My mother was very patient, very kind, capable of controlling her emotions, says Phoebe. She was very refined, didn't talk much, smiling all day, a traditional kind of woman. and so forth. As his wife, it was Grace's duty, Li Hui Chun's wife, it was Grace's duty to support her husband and to produce offspring, especially male heirs. Heirs, right? Heirs. A popular Chinese saying, duo ji duo fu. The more sons, the more happiness. To the utter delight of her husband, Grace's first child was a boy. Tragically, he died when he was 3 months old. Even though infant mortality rates were much higher than now, the loss of a boy was still considered an evil portent, maybe even a sign of curse. When Grace was 8 months pregnant with his second child, the family adopted an infant girl and named her Phoebe. So she was adopted, right? Phoebe Lee. It was odd timing. Hui Chun was struggling to support his mother and his dead brother's family. He didn't need any more mouths to feed. One explanation is Phoebe was a bad omen insurance policy. Superstition dictated the second child must be a girl. If Grace was pregnant with a boy, he was in danger unless he had an older sister. The more likely scenario is Phoebe wasn't a random orphan girl. Hui Chun fathered her with another woman, who, after she gave birth to a daughter instead of a highly valued son, gave the girl to Hui Chun to raise. For her part, Phoebe, who was sensitive about the topic, claims to be a blood relative to her siblings, even though we had different personalities, we were close. Blood is thicker than water, our genes are the same. A month after Phoebe's adoption, Grace gave birth to another daughter, not a son. She was named Agnes. Phoebe is my adopted daughter, Li Hui Chun told US immigration officials in 1941. She is about 40 days older than my own daughter, Agnes. After Agnes, Grace was soon pregnant and again gave birth to son Peter on October 23rd, 1939. His ear was immediately pierced. That's a Chinese superstition thing, right? Keep away the demons, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And this information here. So that's where that came from. The failure of the government in Kung Fu to protect the Chinese people shattered their self-confidence and brought down the Qing dynasty in 1912, resulting in decades of chaos, warlordism and civil war. China became known as the sick man of Asia. Or sick man of Asia. Okay, so that's a message in the movie Chinese Connection or Fist of Furies. Fist of Fury, that's what they were actually called by the Japs. Okay. Japs were planning to kick all the Westerners out of East Asia and colonise it for themselves. They set their sights on the sick man, or China, the Asian community, right? After grabbing territory along China's periphery, the Senkaku Islands, Taiwan, Korea, and Manchuria, the Japanese launched a full-scale invasion of the mainland on July 7, 1937, advancing rapidly and killing millions. Yeah, they did lots of experiments on all that sort of stuff. Li Hui Chun went to America for theatrical work only and listed his occupation as an actor. On Grace's application, she wrote her purpose was accompanying her husband. She fudged her occupation as actress, wardrobe woman. In fact, she was a housewife and mother. The entire extended family went to the Hong Kong harbour docks, etc., etc. It goes on about Hui Chun and Grace. Okay. She got pregnant in America. A healthy baby boy, 5/8 Han's Chinese, 1/4 English, and 1/8 Dutch Jewish, was born at 7:12 a.m. on November 27, 1940. The neighbours called the Le Kian Chian Chiu Theatre left a message for Hui Chun, it's a boy. Hand out cigars. First question all his fellow actors asked was, what are his astrological signs? The Chinese zodiac not only assigns one of 12 animals. Okay. Of the 12 birth signs, the dragon is considered the most powerful and propitious. Chinese emperors took the dragon as a symbol, causing it to be associated with leadership and authority. Many Chinese parents tried to time a pregnancy in the hopes that their child would be born in the year, month, day or hour of the dragon. Hui Chun proudly told everyone that his boy was born in the year of the dragon, the month of the pig, the day of the dog, and the hour of the dragon. 2 dragon signs, especially if one was the year, were considered exceptionally auspicious. The troop all congratulated him. Your son is destined for greatness. Wow, that's amazing. Back in San Francisco, Grace needed to pick out an American name for his son, a natural-born citizen of the United States. When Lee Hui Chun applied for his immigrant visa, his surname was changed from Lee, L-I, to the anglicised version Lee, L-E-E, Lee Hui Chun. And so on the boy's birth certificate, his last name was also written down as Lee, a subtle shift in spelling, demarking a break with the past and a new beginning. For the first name, Grace, who spoke little English, turned to a Chinese-American friend for help. He consulted with the midwife Mary E. Glover, who delivered the baby and signed over the birth certificate. She suggested Bruce. Okay, cool. Wonder if this nurse was the mother of the Glover guy that became Bruce Lee's friend and Black JKD student, right? Jesse Glover, is it? Not very sure.